Oh, hi everyone. My name is Goldi, and I'm a recovered compulsive overeater. My story begins when I was little. To set the backdrop, I was born into a legacy of Hungarian fine delicacies being baked and perfected all around me by all the major female characters in my life. My grandmother, our matriarch, set the precedent of perfecting various Hungarian delicacies and traditional Jewish foods decades before I was born. My mother and her sisters took on this Hungarian line of tradition and followed in suit. On weekends and holidays, we were spoiled with all kinds of sweet desserts. Food was a central part of our lives. And it wasn't just sweets. As Orthodox Jews, we had many traditions and customs that were always accompanied by big feasts. Whether it was our ritual Shabbat dinners, summer Shabbat lunches, lazy Saturday evening, light pescatarian meals, there was always something. And it wasn't necessarily Jewish holidays that we celebrated with food. Also, our weekly Sunday summer barbecues, in which extended family from the Catskill Mountains would drive over from their side of the hill. Food was at every gathering as much as the people and guests were. Okay, I'm just going to pause to recenter myself. Okay, I guess you can say I was born with perhaps not a golden spoon in my mouth, but definitely a bit of homemade Jewish Hungarian sweet delicacies. As a young child, I was neglected and forgotten as the third daughter out of four children. My parents were children of Holocaust and Great Depression survivors, and their energies were spent elsewhere. We had lots of sweets in our home, as well as access to lots of television, and that's how I remember my sister and my brother and I spending a lot of our time. My childhood best friend would often spend Saturday nights with my younger brother and I. We watched a lot of TV and ate a lot of sweets. My older sister, Libby, was in her teenage years and would promise to us and herself that she would go on a diet this coming week. We laughed it off because it didn't really matter to our little tummies. We didn't know what it meant yet to gain weight and care about it. We continued to stare at the screen and eat our junky snacks. Poor innocent children. Little did I know that this unassuming treat that was my friend for all my life would soon be the thing that would hurt me physically in my body and mentally as my mind spun lies to me for punishment for what I ate. And I was always hungry. As a little girl in nursery school, we were having our end of year graduation, and I saw my mom opening her purse to take out something to eat. I walked out of my position in line on the stage and I said, I want something to eat. My middle school years were during the Obama administration when Michelle Obama instituted healthier lunch options. Our school began to give us healthier starches, and I could eat stacks and stacks of that starch without feeling like I made a dent in my stomach. Another facet I should mention is that aside from consuming all this amount of food, there was a lot of value and symbolism placed on what kinds of food we brought from home or bought at the store. My best friend Nechi came from a very aristocratic home and brought prepackaged, finely prepared Caesar salad and fancy dressing from a posh grocery store that many of us looked upon with wistfulness and jealousy. She also had her dad pick up breakfast from their corner cafe, Breakfast Cafe, and that none of us others in our class had that privilege. Many of my classmates ate the school lunch that was provided, which was pretty decent. For some reason, I became very spoiled, and I can't remember which grade it was in elementary school, but I decided with Nechi and my other friends that it was uncool and we brought our own lunches. So Nechi had her fancy lunches, and my friends and I, our other friends, had homemade lunches. It was all very snobby of us, and we felt superior for having our lunches while everyone ate the communal lunches. I don't know when this shift happened. Maybe it was in fourth grade, because until then I loved the school lunches. I was such an innocent schoolgirl that I used to love to thank and say hello to the head cook of the kitchen, a friendly and smiling woman. Later in my middle school years, I looked down at her for being an unflattering looking woman. I don't know where my innocence had gone, and I regret that middle school hardened and made a snob out of me. Also in fourth grade, our school offered canned fruit, and I would gobble them up like they were treats. I will say, though, that in middle school, when we had fresh and juicy fruit for lunch, which we had often, I would devour them up. My plates were full of empty fruit peels. Back to the symbolism of what people brought for lunch from home. One girl brought instant soup, which was such a luxury. I hope it's okay I'm saying that. Um, okay, I used to beg her for some, totally inconsiderate that she wanted to eat her lunch alone. I think I also used to use people as friends so that they would share their homemade lunch with me. And it may have been me or my cool and superior friend group that started the trend to influence others to bring home lunches, even though our parents were probably paying for school lunches. Our poor parents, my poor parents, I was such a difficult child to be around and have, and I was very demanding, superior, and snobby. In high school, I had a very poor self esteem because I was bullied by my sisters and I was coming from a neglectful and dysfunctional home. Some girls in my class cared about health, fads, diets, makeup, and the kind of underwear they wore. And I felt very old fashioned and I stayed very quiet and I ate a lot. My memory is a bit foggy about the beginning of my high school experience, but I do remember trying to restrict and totally failing. It was like trying to hold my breath underwater for more than 10 seconds, and I couldn't hold it any longer. I needed to exhale, which for me meant to eat. To eat meant to survive the tumultuous, rocky, and isolated years of my teens. I downloaded workout videos from YouTube to do in my room to compulsively try to flatten my tummy. Because of the way I grew up, I was unfamiliar with YouTube and felt strange going on such a site to find exercise videos. This was my first time doing workouts that specifically targeted muscle groups to tone one's body. Before then, I had Zumba and tennis lessons, but this seemed so foreign and scary and secular to try to look like the outside world. I had no idea what these rock hard abbed women in the videos were talking about, and I didn't understand a word they meant. Yet, try with all my might, I did to follow the directions. I had no idea how to do the movements, yet, try with all my might, I did. I was hurting myself, and looking back, I have so much compassion for my confused younger self. Because I was so unfamiliar with these kinds of workouts, I had no sense of what was normal to be feeling before and doing before and after doing the crunches. I simply had no idea. Then, for some reason, in 10th grade, I started to lose weight and I kept it off in 11th. In the late spring of my junior year, I was diagnosed with celiac disease and even more weight came off. However, I noticed that summer that all my cravings and carrying out those sprees with sweet delicacies I could no longer have turned into junky nosh. I was never much of a nosh girl. I had it from time to time, but it was never my binge food. So I binged on all kinds of sweets, meticulous at the time to make sure there was no gluten in it. That was short lived in the grand scheme of things. This went on for a few years until the summer before this last one. This summer, before this past one, I spent a few months in a trauma treatment center. During my time there, I was in so much emotional pain that I knew I was binging all the time, and I just knew I was going to eat one or more of the sweets that my housemate liked to make. As I was pounding them into my mouth, I was crying with tears rolling down my face because I didn't even want them or like them anymore. I hated how much I was hurting myself and my body, and that there was nothing else I could have done at that point to comfort my own emotional pain and trauma. Also, while living in the treatment center's house, we had a communal pantry bin of people's giveaway food that we were able to eat. I would scrounge the bin all the time for sweets, junk, something to lessen the anguish and my pain. I did this even though I didn't want to buy these same things for myself because I wanted to eat green and healthy. I did this even though I did have my own sweets from the grocery store. What was ironic, though, was that because we were all in the treatment center together, and maybe this wasn't the reason for other people's sweets consumption, I really don't know, and it's not my place to judge. I would see others buy sweets, and one woman in particular had junk food for breakfast. And I would judge her so hard and look down at her so evilly for being so crass and jaded and not caring about her health. I judged her for her life, her lifestyle choices, her traumas, and how she was living because I couldn't keep the focus on me. In the meantime, I was binge eating, defecating madly, and breaking out in cystic acne. My life was a mess until someone told me about OA. I thought, yes, this will be the solution to my problems. I will work the steps and get a psychic change. I was trying to control the outcome of my program. So I started in OA and was picky about sponsors, trying to control who would be the right fit for me. I thought I decided on the right person because she was an old timer, compassionate, and not so strict about weighing and measuring. And at the time, I was going to meetings in another fellowship and I was talking about my food problems. And one woman reached out and gave me such a rigid plan that I tried for about 2 days, which was only vegetables and proteins, only raw vegetables, only a spoonful of olive oil, and veggies could not be starchy at all. I started panicking when I realized I would have to keep this up for a lifetime. And besides, the woman who gave me these directions on the
10 minutes,
screen,
Goldi, 5 to go. Thank you.
thank you. The woman on the screen looked so emaciated, and I was scared, and the crazed excitement in which she spoke about her food plan and her recovery jarred me. It was too much, so I quit. That's when I reached out to another woman who was more flexible, but she was too flexible, checking her phone while we spoke, laughing at me. I felt very unsafe and patronized. I was also going to various OA meetings online, and I felt lost in a sea of maze of people and opinions. I went on like this for a few months with this sponsor very unhappily. I did what she said, but emotionally resisted. I was not there, and my heart wasn't in it at all. I went through the motions, said yes to all the right things, and I did so very depressedly. My anxiety was not tamed. I felt no real connection to a higher power, and I was still obsessing over my next meal or ruminating on my last one. I was abstinent, but an emotional wreck. In the fall of 2023, I came to Israel for a study program that really appealed to me. My mental health was really suffering, and 3 months into my stay here, my same therapist told me about a certain fellowship to help with one of my other issues. I initially joined the group for that particular 12-step need. When I heard of it and looked into it, my hopes soared and I finally felt there was life at last. I can be free, I can dream, and I can fly. I joined it and began doing the work. While doing the 5th step with my sponsor, I began experiencing tremendous stomach pain that got in the way of my 5th step. My sponsor patiently stayed on the line, and I finally conceded to myself and to her that I need to work this program for my food and eating as well. Prior to joining, she told me she could be a dual sponsor for me for my eating and my other issue. I want to say the rest is history, but I should give an account of what happened. I finished my 5th step and had such a spiritual awakening that was indescribably awesome. I went through with 6 and 7, asking my higher power to remove my defects, and did 8 and 9, making a list of people I had harmed, and made my first amendment and continue to do so while in program. 10, 11, and 12 is where I live today. I do daily 10th steps, which are mini inventories to stay accountable for what my part is in a certain upsetting encounter. I meditate daily on my higher power's will for me in the morning and throughout the day. I pause when in doubt and ask my higher power for direction and guidance and how she would have me be. I carry out service actions, whether it's moderating a meeting, reading and sharing on a meeting, calling a newcomer, and sponsoring. I also do kind acts every day outside of the program, whether it's cleaning up the kitchen a bit for others, offering a kind word to someone struggling, or making sure to thank the bus drivers and other necessary servers in the community. My sponsor told me in the beginning that this program is not for weight loss. It's about staying connected to higher power and living in the solution, which is being a service to others and higher power. I'm not going to say that the obsession around my body weight doesn't come to mind. It does. But now I have tools to work with it. I can write a 10th step and be of service. Getting out of self and staying connected to the solution and higher power is the remedy to my food and weight distress. When I'm happy, things fall into place, and I'm much more nurturing and forgiving to myself, my body, and my eating patterns. I don't beat myself up anymore, and I know I'm growing and evolving human being that is lovable, growing, imperfect, and beautiful. My curves make me human, and my beauty goes deeper than my skin. Again, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I'm definitely more self-loving, nurturing, and compassionate to myself and my body than I have ever been before. And for me, that is a success. I will say that again. I'm a success today because I'm more kinder, nurturing, and self-compassionate to myself and my body more than I ever was to myself. Thy will be done. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I just want to pause before I end. Yeah, I kind of read fast, so I hope my ESH was still clear and the message came over. And yeah, I'm really glad to be of service.